I had it set so it would cut off the head. You would just hear the voice.
Okay, that's what I do.
Good. Maybe we need to hear a voice from above with that particular face. I would be less than honest with you if I told you that it was easy to prepare any kind of a sermon this week. I was only kidding.
I wasn't.
I missed you. This has been an awful week to try to prepare a sermon, to put words together to make sense. I mean, putting together something very, very harsh and politically oriented would have been easy. I could go on a rant, really easy. Poor Ron caught part of it the other day, and I was being nice, you know. I didn't feel like typing, you didn't hear half of what I wanted to say, nor in the language I wanted to say it in. And as I threw away 3 different versions of this particular sermon this week, it dawned on me I was focusing on the wrong things. So I went through all the readings again. I went through what Ann read and what Aiden read, and it said, oh God, yes. You do talk to me, I just don't listen. So let me share with you something which I get a chance to reflect on, and once I know this annoyed you, Ron, because of the way I introduced it, but I have to put it in proper context. About 1,000 years ago, when I was a student studying the course in Scripture, first semester of second year, we got the course on what is called the Pauline literature, all the parts of the New Testament attributed to St. Paul or to his school of thought. And little old Father Zeta, who taught the course, who was one of the best teachers I ever had. And I remember him for 2 reasons. First of all, not only because he was a great teacher, great pedagogue who knew his material, but he was like 3 foot nothing. He was like, you know, no bigger than a minute, number one. So that he actually got up on the podium and the microphone was above him. And it's something you kind of remember being a snarky theological student, you know, thinks he knows it all. And the other thing I remember about him was that he was one of the few Italians who taught me in my 4 years in Italy. International University, of the 40 or 50 professors I had in the course of those 4 years, I had 3 who were Italian. So he actually spoke the clearest in the lecture, so I actually could understand the best. Because it's hard hearing, you know, having a Yugoslavian professor speaking Italian, you're an American, hearing Italian, writing in English. A lot gets, so if you hear heresies in my sermons, that's probably the reason why. A lot of it got lost in the translation. But I remember Father Zeta, as he prepared us for what was going to be a really difficult course. And he said, we will get to the letter to the Hebrews, but I want to set the context right now. I want you to understand something. You will not understand the letter until you understand when it was written, why it was written, so that it is one of the great misnomers in the Bible. A letter, it is not. It is a sermon. From St. Paul, probably not, probably from one of his disciples. Part of his, and this is a phrase that's wrong, I put it in quotes, the school of Paul, those who wrote under his influence, those who were taught by him. And it wasn't written to Hebrews, it was written to Jewish Christians. That much you all know, all right? Letter of Paul to the Hebrews, not a letter, not Paul, not Hebrews. Okay? But also, because of where it fits into the syllabus and the curriculum, very few clergy who stand in front of you have ever studied it. Because it's always at the very, very end of the course. And if you have enough time, the professor gets to it. In his case, he barely did. What I've done over the course of 40 plus years in ministry is take this letter apart bit by bit from the little bit that I learned in his class, trying to make sense of it for me. Because it is a very complex, deeply theological writing that really focuses on who Jesus is and why we believe in him. Because Jesus is the priest who offers the ultimate sacrifice to God for our redemption. But his unique position, he is the gift that's being offered. He is the priest making the offering, and his body is the temple in which the offering is made. And the writer weaves these themes together in this beautifully deep theological reflection on who Jesus is for us, making us want to step back and say, what is it I believe? And that's what we got this morning in the second lesson. Chapters 11 and 12 is the writers taking this little time off and making a reflection on what it means to believe. Really believe. When you say the words, we're going to say in the creed, we believe in one God. We believe. What do those words mean? This gift from God and this human response to God, all wrapped up in one action. Do you remember how you started the reading in? Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things unseen. Very poetic, powerful. Take it to heart. You know, I'll challenge you. Think of the week we've just come off of. And remember, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things unseen. We want faith to be technical. Give me the things I have to believe. Okay? Give me the chemical chart that you all memorized in high school, which was on, it's like what, 5,000 molecule chemicals now. It was like 11 when I was in school. It was really easy. It was just, they just painted it on the cave and you just memorized it. It was really easy to remember. It's a little bit more difficult now. But what it means to believe in terms of faith as a relationship, faith that involves trust, faith that involves lived out love and commitment. The gift that is given to us when we were baptized and the response to God we make throughout our lives, no matter how dark or gray or dreary or hate-filled those weeks are. To believe in Jesus is to know that what I believe in him is absolutely certain and absolutely true. And I am utterly convinced of it and of his victory, even if I don't see it and even if I don't feel it. This is a week I felt very little in terms of hope or love, and yet this is the test of faith. I was reminded, again, maybe it's because of having gone over to Europe, I've got Europe on the brain, remembering and knowing that you guys were in Rome, brought back a lot of memories. And I remember the church history course, one of the things we had to translate, and if you know a little bit about church history, the Romans were kind of like the Nazis. They kept great records of all the atrocities they committed, and they make for great exam questions on how to translate a passage, all right? And there was one passage in church history I will never forget. It was on an exam, and it was just the reflection of it was this very unimportant person standing before the governor, and I forget exactly where the governor was, and he had been arrested as a Christian, and he was going to be executed. And he was basically what the majority of the early members of the church were, urban poor, no names. Christianity is basically a religion of the urban poor, for the most part. A couple of rich people scattered here and there, but mostly poor people who didn't have a whole of anything, who weren't terribly important. Jesus would himself would fit in that category. And he stands before the governor, and the governor is now about to sentence him to death. And according to the court transcript, which was I found so fascinating, the governor says to him, "You actually believe in this Christ?" And the man said, "Yes. I can save your life. All you have to say is no. But I believe." So he turns to him and said, "Do you actually believe that your God is that interested in someone as unimportant and as useless as you, that he would actually save you?" And the man responded to the governor, "I don't think it, I believe it." That's the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of what is unseen. To be a Christian today, I think, means believing in spite of the darkness, acknowledging the darkness, realizing that the struggle is going to be throughout our lifetime. But it does not mean we acknowledge that it will ever win. We forget the fact that for us the future is always uncertain. We trust, we hope, but we don't know. Not in our hearts. We can't possibly know what tomorrow will bring. But we forget the fact that for God, the future is completely certain. For God, there is no time. There is no tomorrow. God sees our tomorrows as clearly as we see the next 5 minutes. And we forget that. What I don't want to go into the question of feeling, I do want to go into the question of trust. If there's a time for Christians to put aside anything at all, trust is not the one thing to put away. I believe in God in whose hands I stand and held. And I believe in a God who will somehow clean up the mess that we have made of this earth of his. And I know it makes no sense. It's kind of like the story of Abraham and Sarah. We read it as a cute story. All right, here's this dude who's 75 years old. His wife is approximately the same age. And he confronts his God, and he deals with the fact that he's going to die, and all he's worked for is going to be given away to one of the household employees, because he has no children. Because you can't have children at the age of 75, right, ladies? Okay, you're all saying, better not. All right. Yeah, I know, Cynthia. I get it.
Thank God.
Thank God. Okay, that's all the appropriate responses. And yet, in his heart, in his mind, however he experienced the voice of his God, a God whose name he does not even know, he knows his prayer will be answered because he believes, even though common sense and logic and science and everything else says you're out of your mind. It cannot be. But in God's hands, all things are possible. We end the psalm today, we say, Lord, we put our trust in you. Well, do we? Do we really? Or is it just a bunch of words? So today is not about blaming, and it's not about me crossing a line or staying on the other side of a line, because that's not what this is about. This is about trying to understand what it means when we say the words I believe, and how it touches the rest of our lives. And what I'm willing to do, and what I'm willing to work for, me personally, what I'm willing to be responsible for in my commitment to the God I believe in. Let your loving kindness be upon us, O Lord, as we put our trust in you. Where's your treasure? What will you pursue? Where is your heart? Or do you want to sit back and blame, which is plenty to go around, and whine, which is perfectly understandable, but accomplishes nothing? I leave you this as a funny story, but it's not so funny, but just kind of keep it in mind. It's a matter of perspective. It's a reminder that what we think is so certain in terms of those who have power and those who don't. We think what we see today is absolutely certain for the future. Just keep this in mind. And I got this from an old prof of mine, not somebody I actually had in class, but somebody I got to know when studying. And he reminded me many, many centuries ago when I was a student. He said, you know, think of the moment when Paul himself stood before Nero, who had petitioned to come to Rome to be having his case heard before the emperor, which it was, and he lost, which he knew he would, and he's going to be executed. And there is the emperor of Rome, Nero, crazy as he was. And there is Paul being condemned to death. There's power, there's powerlessness. That's the way it's always going to be, right? In our day, we call our sons Paul and our dogs Nero. Where's the power? Who really has the power? Who do we really put our faith in?